Reaction to the challenges posed by unemployment insurance during the 1930s. For 10 years, unemployment and unemployment insurance took center stage in the concern of the country's various social forces and the government. The ensuing intense political debates produced a number of major policy changes which reflected the interests of the employers rather than the labor movement. From the 1927 until March 1935, Belgium was ruled by conservative Catholic liberal coalition government. Throughout this period, the socialists languished in opposition. The conservative government willingly lent an ear to the mouthpiece of employers' interests, the National Employers' Federation, the Central Industrial Committee or CCI, which was particularly strongly represented in the traditional heavy industries like mining, metal, glass, and etc. During the first half of the 1930s, the government launched an array of initiatives intended to root out the worst excesses of the unemployment benefit system. This included removing workers from unemployment insurance by tightening conditions for eligibility, reducing benefit payment, and tightening conditions for eligibility for this payment, in particular by circumscribing the in-need criteria for the post-statutory allowance. Although we will not deal with this complex development any further, one other important aspect should be stressed, namely the government's policy of centralization. The uncoordinated local initiative, which in the eyes of the employers pushed benefit to excessively high levels in some areas and made the labor market disordered and inflexible, were abolished. From 1933 onwards, the municipalities and provinces were no longer allowed to contribute to unemployment benefit. The municipal unemployment funds, which had previously played a major administrative role also by exercising some control over the union unemployment funds, but which subsequently became, according to the conservatives, a tool of the union and progressive politicians, were replaced by regional institutions directly linked to the central government. Despite these measures, the crux of unemployment insurance, the monopoly position of the unions, remained unchanged. The abolition of union unemployment funds would have precipitated a direct and dangerous power struggle with the trade union movement, something which the employers and the conservatives would not countenance at this stage. The conservative government needed the parliamentary support of the Christian Democrats to remain in office, and the latter had made the retention of the funds a precondition for their continued support. But as the economic crisis worsened, the position of the opponents of union involvement also hardened. Whether one likes it or not, it will be imperative to grasp the nettle and put an impenetrable barrier between the system of unemployment insurance and the trade unions. As a major employers' organization in the metal industry remarked. Towards the end of 1934 and in the early months of 1935, government circles began seriously to discuss the possibility of abolishing the union unemployment funds and replacing them with a government-run scheme. In the end, the trial of strength between government and employers on the one hand and the trade unions on the other never took place. From March 1935 onwards, the country's economic situation began to improve, partly due to a successful devaluation on the French carried out by a new government of national unity, including socialist ministers led by Paul van Zeelen. Unemployment fell sharply, whereas 23% of all insured workers were unemployed in January 1935. The number had fallen to 11% by the summer of 1936. The government also jettisoned the restrictive austerity policy of the first half of the 1930s, also a consequence of the stronger presence of representatives of the labor movement. Consequently, the whole debate on unemployment insurance lost some of its edge. Against this, however, the immediate pre-war years 1936 until 40 were dominated by long and vigorous debates over the introduction of a scheme of compulsory unemployment insurance. These debates throw an interesting light on the origin of the system of social insurance introduced in Belgium in 1944 and which remains in force until this day. It would therefore be informative to deal with this problem in some detail. As mentioned earlier, the replacement of voluntary unemployment insurance by a compulsory system had been discussed in Belgium some years earlier, immediately after the First World War. But during the 1920s and the early 1930s, no one seriously pursued this reform. Both the employers and the workers' organization feared that the outcome of such a change would be to their disadvantage. But the Depression years created a new situation. The strains put on the unions as a result of mass unemployment gave greater currency to a view already held in embryonic form within the union movement before the crisis. Some argued that the concentration of the union's energies and financial resources on unemployment led to a neglect or even an abandonment of other tasks, the union's real tasks, in particular the conduct of industrial dispute or strikes. Union officials cautioned against strike action because the union would not be able to withstand its effect financially. Would the labor movement therefore not be better off by ending its involvement in the administration of unemployment insurance and leave this to the state? This argument was put forward with increasing frequency within the Socialist Trade Union Federation, the Trade Union Commission, in particular by the national leadership and several regional and sectoral organizations from Wallonia, which wanted to put greater stress on the class struggle, which in their view was being neglected in favor of purely bureaucratic work. Socialist union leaders used the opportunity offered by a spontaneous nationwide general strike in June 1936 to obtain a pledge from the National Unity Government to introduce compulsory unemployment insurance. The government called on Henry I, a Belgian specialist on unemployment insurance with socialist leaning and a senior official at the International Labour Office or ILO in Geneva to prepare this important reform, appointed as the Royal Commissioner for Unemployment. First was asked to study all aspects of the issue and prepare a report on the basis of which the government would present a bill to Parliament. The fact that the submission made to first differed widely and that some were irreconcilable provide an indication of the controversial nature of the planned reform, which many regarded as the most important reform ever submitted to the legislature. Few of the protagonists doubted that the eventual institutional shape of the new compulsory scheme of unemployment insurance would have far-reaching implications for the balance of power between the social forces. The employer's standpoint was unequivocal. It was imperative that the new system break the hegemony of the unions in the sphere, that it be transferred from the private to the public sector. Paradoxically, Then the employers, as well as the liberal and the conservative politicians, argued for an extension of state intervention on the grounds that this would reduce the influence of the trade union movement in the social sphere. Thank you.